want to know how you see the world. Do you seek out urban beauty? Or do you create your own landscapes? Maybe it's outdoor adventure that makes your world turn. Let us bring your passion into focus and give you the best view yet. At Botwin Eye Group and Oculus Optical, we defy the norms by combining advanced medical eye care with Santa Fe's finest selection of luxury and artful eyeglasses. Botwin Eye Group and Oculus Optical, 2 locations in Santa Fe.
Santa Fe Gloom podcast. We're back with a great guest, as always, Marcus from the U.S Soccer Collective. Marcus, thanks so much for jumping on tonight.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks for reaching out, and I'm excited to talk soccer with you for a bit. And yeah, just grateful to be here. So let's get started.
You're welcome, man. Thank you for jumping on. And our audience, you know, my barking puppy Biscuit, he is in the barking mood. And Marcus, I think you've got a dog back there too that might be kind of barking too. So I've told our listeners that I'll give probably $10 per bark to an animal shelter. So we'll see what happens. But
That's nice.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good gesture, and it keeps this puppy under control, the main thing. So but yeah, he's like just down here like ready to bark. So I can't say his name too loud.
Understand.
But, all right, man. Well, tell us what you do, and for the soccer community, where you live, and your first soccer memory.
Yeah. So I call myself a soccer consultant, mainly a youth soccer consultant, and that takes many forms. I think I got started in purely scouting for the joy of scouting, and really I wanted to understand what was going on in the youth landscape and understand kind of how has soccer development changed. I guess I really started getting involved about 5 years ago, and it started when I was watching the national team and was kind of seeing a different kind of player on the team, like a more exciting players that were playing at bigger clubs at younger ages. And it really sparked my interest of like, okay, what's going on that's different? Is there something different going on in the United States in soccer? And I really just started a journey of learning and talking to as many people that were experts in the space. And that has sort of blossomed into writing, scouting, helping families make decisions on clubs and academies, helping families make decisions on agents, and really trying to help families navigate what is a pretty complicated and can be misguided landscape in the United States. So really mainly trying to help families make good decisions. And that's the scouting part is like what I really enjoy doing, and kind of am always trying to find time to do in my spare time, and writing about it and bringing awareness to fans about what's going on the youth side of things, because there's energy around it. And then the sort of evaluation and helping families is something I do because I think it's just needed in the United States.
Give our listeners the landscape of U.S. youth soccer. For example, club level, high school, MLS Next, college. What's the journey for a player out there, or for parents, right? What could they be looking forward to in terms of getting their son or daughter to the U.S. national team? What does that all entail?
Well, yeah, it starts with grassroots soccer, which is kind of like what a lot of us maybe experienced as as young kids. And the challenge, I think, the challenge that the United States faces versus like countries that have have cultural roots and passions all across country in the sport is that we just don't have the breadth and reach of people that love the sport and understand the sport and can at least coach the sport at a fundamental and effective level for young people. And so what I think that leads to is you don't have a lot of kids fall in love with the sport at an early age because maybe their family doesn't really know much about it. So unless you are like a first, second generation immigrant family or a family with roots in soccer, it can be difficult to find good coaching at the grassroots level. And really good coaching at the grassroots level is like making sure kids have the ball at their feet at all times and are having fun. And so that's like a big challenge, I think, in the United States is we just don't have a lot of people who understand the sport and pass their love of the sport on. And so you get a lot of kids kind of like go in other directions as they're sort of like narrowing down sports. So beyond grassroots, then it starts to get, a bit more complicated where if you're like you're a family that wants to take it a bit more serious, that's where kind of the pay to play model comes in. Because there aren't a lot of good coaching, it's been commercialized. If you do have a clue as to know, can organize a club and an academy and have decent coaching, you can typically get families to pay pretty significant prices for that. And that's where a lot of challenges occur in terms of like accessibility, for families that can't either travel or take time or pay the money it takes to play at one of these pay to play clubs or academies.
Can you explain the pay to play model? It's kind of self-explanatory, but for our listeners who may not know exactly what that means, can you explain that?
Yeah, it basically just means that you're paying, even at early ages, thousands of dollars a year, and then it can get more expensive as they get older and play at more competitive levels. But thousands of dollars a year to get to play on a kind of traveling team, even if it's like regionally traveling, and get decent coaching. And this is starting at like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And so some maybe more well-established clubs will have programs where if you're really good, they'll try to sort out the fees so that you can play with them. But not all of them do that. And so it's a model that's taken shape in the United States mainly because there's not a huge supply of good coaching. So when the supply is low and you have it, you can charge for it. And the professional academies have helped because they do not cost money, but they're typically starting maybe at the best like the U10, U11 age groups. And for a lot of kids, if you haven't been playing competitively up until under 10, under 11, you're behind. So even though maybe it's free at that age group, if you haven't been in pay to play programs and getting better training, you're behind and you maybe are going to have less likelihood to get access to these professional academies. So it really is, it is still a fairly inaccessible sport in the country, and a sport for middle upper class families. And then you've got more of like your immigrant families who know the sport and can coach and teach their kids at a good level and not maybe have to rely so much on paid coaching. So yeah, that's still a massive infrastructural problem in the United States that I don't think is going away anytime soon.
And talk about the college level MLS Next and those paths for for youth development?
Yes, I'd say at like kind of the under 14, under 15 age groups, things start to get quite serious. So if you're an elite player, you are playing either at, there's lots of competitive club leagues. MLS Next is probably the most competitive at this point. That's where all the MLS academies play. And then there are independent academies as well. They've got like 100 or something academies, 100 plus academies throughout the country. There's also ECNL, which is probably the second best academy league, which is all pay to play. And then there are some others like NASL, not quite as high of a level. That's usually like kids playing at that are like they're hoping to go play, decent level of college. ECNL is probably kids are probably looking to play college either at a higher level or Division II lower level. And then MLS Next, in large part, at the academies they're trying to work towards a professional career. So as under 15 level, like that's where things start to get really competitive. It's when the youth national teams start getting underway. Kids are signing as early as 14, 15, 16, 17 years old to professional contracts. So that's a unique thing about soccer, I think, is you've got families who are having to make really big decisions about their children's future, and the children are having to make really big decisions at really young ages, way younger than any other, team, like first tier team sport like basketball, football, baseball, where the path is typically, you play high school, you go to college, maybe for a little bit, and then you go pro. It's not that linear or straightforward in soccer. So your options kind of start at 16, right? So like to leave the country and go play in Europe before 16, your basically family has to leave for like work, career, life reasons, which does happen. If you have access to an EU passport, you can leave to go to Europe at 16. If you don't, you can't go to Europe until you're 18. And so oftentimes 18 is a really pivotal age because kids that are good either are deciding between, do I sign professionally here in the United States to like USL, which is like the second tier league in the United States with MLS? Do I go to college, at a high level, get an education, or do I go over to Europe or somewhere else abroad? So those are kind of the four most common paths in the United States when you turn 18. A lot of times, if you're really good, you're already making a decision to go somewhere before that.
Yeah. One thing that I'm real proud of with the Santa Fe Gloom, as you know, there's $10 there.
Number one.
Yeah. Is with the Santa Fe Gloom, we're a futsal team. And the pay-to-play model, I'm learning, right? And I'm learning how we can kind of jump through those hurdles. One thing with the Santa Fe Gloom at the moment is our games are free, and then we have showcase games where the kiddos are playing before the Gloom team, free of charge. So they're learning the basics of futsal. So that's one way that our community is trying to break down those barriers and make it real accessible for our kids to learn soccer for free.
Yeah.
So, in Europe or South America, why are they so good? Are they doing something differently at the youth side that the United States is not?
I think a lot of people have perspectives on this. I think it comes down to like, think about basketball culture in the United States, right? You've got kids playing pickup constantly. Yeah. They have lots of idols to look at and like emulate their game around. And so you're kind of just like culturally understand, learn how to express yourself in really creative ways and play the game in kind of this very free environment. We just don't have a lot of that in the United States, whereas like in Brazil, in Argentina, in France, even in England, like you've got kids playing pickup soccer from like the moment they can like have a ball at their feet. And I also think there's just a larger emphasis on like expressing yourself and playing the game in a way where it's on you to make good decisions, think creatively. I think because we're behind, our kids get overcoached, and so they're almost like they get like kind of like patterns of play drilled into their mental of like, this is what you do if I'm here, this is what you do if I'm here. And it's like, well, what happens when what you expect to be in front of you isn't? Can you ad lib? Can you think on your feet and come up with a solution? I think when you're not taught at an early age to just like kind of think freely and play freely, I think that's the biggest difference between when you look at like a United States youth team play. It's like physically, technically, we're not that far behind anymore. But in terms of like understanding of the game and playing real like diverse and expansive soccer in a way where you can like, no matter what gets thrown at you, you can come up with an idea to get out of it or to take advantage of the team against you. Like, we just don't have a lot of teams and players that play that way yet. And I think, again, it goes back to like grassroots, culturally learning how to play the game in a very like organic way early on. And that's going to take generations of new people loving the sport, passing that love on to their children, and their children playing that way from young ages. And I think that's going to take generations to happen.
When you're scouting youth players, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so it's kind of like there's like a pretty common model of like kind of like four major categories. So I get criticized a lot, and the United States gets criticized a lot of over prioritizing like physical traits, but that's kind of like a big part. And I think if you
What does that mean? Physical traits. What do you mean by that?
yeah, so like size, strength, athleticism, like coordination, speed, being able to move laterally, being able to, run.
That makes sense to me though, right? So why are you being criticized for it?
I think,
What are you missing? This is the IQ?
well, no, I mean, so the four aspects are like your physical traits, your technical ability. So what can you do with the ball? How good can you control the ball? How, what can you do as a passer, striking the ball? Like basically, how are you with the ball is how I would describe technical ability. Tactical is more of that, like the IQ side. Like, do you understand where you need to be? Do you understand space? Do you understand how to move off the ball? And do you understand like how to get out of tight situations? There's also a defensive side to tactical ability. So like, are you in good positions? Are you reading the game in front of you really well? So technical, tactical, physical, and then the part that's probably hardest for someone to measure from a distance is the mental side, more like mentality. Like, how are you as a person in terms of like work ethic? Do you love the game? Like, what are your training habits? How are you as a communicator, as a leader? Are you just tough? Like, what's your effort like? So like, you can see toughness and effort by not really knowing, but you kind of have to talk to people close to players to know like, how do they train? How much do they love the game? Like, is it a priority for them, or is it just like something they're just doing because they're good at it? So that's usually the stuff that separates good and great players, right? Like, you can be technical, great athlete, understand the game, but if you don't really love it, you don't really work hard, you're probably going to have a ceiling. That's probably the thing hardest to measure, but probably the biggest difference when you see like a good player from a great player. So those are the four areas I look at. I think there's like criticism that United States youth only cares about athleticism because the big strong kids are going to help you win the most at young ages, which I do think is a fair criticism. I do think that's a little bit of an outdated way of looking at the landscape. I think there are lots of smart technical players in MLS academies. I think what people maybe don't acknowledge as much is like there is a threshold now, even at the highest levels of soccer physically, that you pretty much have to hit to play at a high level. Like it is a physical athletic game more than it has ever been. And I've seen way too many young players who are really good at U15, U17 because they're really smart and technical. But as soon as they start having to play against grown men, they just aren't able to impact the game. And it's like the Luka Modric's of the world that are not maybe the most physically impressive, but incredibly technical, incredibly smart. Those are edge cases. Their most high level players are also elite athletes. So you just have to look at players when you're scouting, like, do they meet a threshold of like, no matter how good they are technically or tactically, are they still going to be able to perform when they have to go play against a 28-year-old, someone in the prime physical peak of their life? So that's just something I'm constantly having conversations with people about, I think.
Yeah, I would imagine if you're scouting youth players, growth spurts have to come into an account too, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. That's a great point. Yes. I mean,
we're just
oftentimes, I think, oftentimes the best players are the ones that grow late. And this is true in lots of sports. Like, they have to learn how to be undersized. So they have to learn how to be tough.
Yeah.
They have to learn how to use their technique. They have to be smarter. And then the kids who like grow late and now all of a sudden have a physical advantage, it's like, well, now this is easy.
Right.
And so, yeah, like whenever you try to get like these clubs are really smart now, like they're advanced. So they do a lot of tests, like density tests to see like to try to predict if late developers and if they are going to grow late, because they will stick with them longer. Because if they do, they know that they might have something special. So I try to get that information. A lot of times, there's a lot of data around, because so soccer's organized around birth year. It's not like school, right? So if you were born in December 31st, 2007 or whatever, you're going to play with January 1st, 2007 in most cases, where you are a grade behind that person. So a lot of times you'll see that kids who succeed that are born in the fourth quarter of the year, if they're succeeding at younger ages, that's a strong indicator that they're gonna start to pass people, because they've always been playing against older kids. And then there's kids, of course, that are really good that have always played against older kids. They'll play up age groups. They'll play up 2-year age groups, and those obviously a good indicator because they're used to playing against bigger, stronger kids. So yeah, you do have to take that into account for sure.
And talk us through the U.S. Soccer Collective and your top 50 prospect list.
Yeah, I've always just kind of been a nerd about prospecting and knowing who's kind of like who are the talents coming through, and so it's more of a way to pass that. I think there's other people like me that like to know and like to kind of like have discourse about it. And so it's just a way of having a conversation with people and to give people kind of a, obviously my subjective view at who the top players are under 19. I basically review from U15 to U19, and I'm just giving my opinion on who I think has the strongest likelihood to, have the most success in a professional career. And, I'm wrong a lot, like anybody who does this kind of work. But I think I have at least a solid framework for for getting this information out to people. And I think people like to know. I think people are excited about the growth of soccer in the United States. And I think it just gives people something to learn about, get excited about. So I update it twice a year, usually November, December, after kind of the fall season gets underway, and then in the summer after the season ends, the academy season ends. So yeah, that's what goes into it.
And number one, Gavin.
Yeah, Cavan is a really hot topic right now. Probably, we got 2 whining dogs at the moment.
So do I. I got one barking one.
We've got Cavan is, he's hype. He just debuted for Philadelphia Union, the youngest, player to ever debut, broke Freddie Adu's record. And he's probably the most hyped prospect we've had in this country since Freddie Adu, and probably more recently since Christian Pulisic, maybe to a lesser extent. And yeah, it's fun, right? Like, I think it's the first thing I'll say. It's like really important to remind people that he's 14, turning 15 in a few months. He's really young. He's got a lot of pressure that's now accumulating. So there's a long ways to go between him being just an exciting prospect and like a legitimate professional soccer player. But he's got a ton of talent. And I think the hype is deserved in terms of like where he's at his age versus where most kids are at his age. And it's not just a United States thing. I think he's thought of as one of the best players in his age group in the world. And that is why, probably the most successful club in the world right now, Manchester City, signed him to a pre-contract to be a player of theirs when he turns 18. So that's still 3.5 years away. But yeah, he's a really fun player to evaluate. He's got tons of talent. He's always played against players that are 2-3 years older than him, and he's now playing mostly against players that are like 3, 4, 5 years older than him, and still succeeded. So really never seen Cavan play against kids his own age, which would be interesting to see. But yeah, he seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. He comes from a soccer family. His brother is a good player for Philadelphia Union. His cousins play high-level academy soccer. So he's grown up, like I was talking about, right? He's grown up in a family where he's played the game his whole life and plays the game with a flair and kind of creativity that we don't see a lot in the United States. So yeah, I'm super excited to track his progress. I think he's doing all the right things. Hopefully Philadelphia Union doesn't, rush him to put too much pressure on him. But yeah, so he's, like I said, he's 14. He does have a German passport, so he can go to Europe at 16. And the sort of agreement between Philly and Manchester City are that if they think the best thing for him his development is to go to Europe before 18, they'll do it. I imagine Cavan's camp and Manchester City have the majority of like influence in that decision, and then at 18 he becomes a Manchester City player. Now, whether that means he's playing for the first team at Manchester City at 18 is yet to be determined. They could loan him to other clubs, but it'll be a fun ride to see him grow for sure.
And the comparison to Freddie Adu.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily like stylistically. I think it's more just, Freddie was a phenom before soccer really was kind of like well established in the United States. And so there wasn't these levels of like good academy soccer second tiers, second teams. There wasn't a really established MLS at a decent level. So Freddie didn't really have the infrastructure around him to maybe like grow up slower and develop slower and maybe have less pressure. He went to Benfica at a pretty young age. I mean, I think like Freddie, people look at Freddie's story and say, like, oh, we just overhyped him because we didn't have anybody. I think he was worth all of the hype. I think the overhype, the lack of infrastructure here, and then he just had like a lot of bad injury luck. That's kind of what led to maybe not as exciting of a career as we all would have hoped. But I think there's a lot more infrastructure in place now for Cavan to have success. And he's just got a lot of good people around him to help him navigate his career thoughtfully. So his chances are just, assuming good health, his chances are just higher because he's got a better environment around him.
And talk us through some success stories, some local success stories, some players that or that you've mentored, that you've come across, that you feel like, all right, United States, we've got even more hope going on.
I think I would point towards like maybe what's going on the U.S. youth soccer side of things. So for a long time, we've been playing kind of like second tier to Mexico in our region. We've won the last 3 U20 kind of regional championships in the United States. I think consistently putting out more talented, more successful youth teams than Mexico. Not to say Mexico is like the barometer, but they have been in our region for a while. Now, part of that is not just like the United States getting better and Mexico getting better. A lot of it is like the United States getting better and Mexico's having its own problems and maybe not at the level that they once were. But if you look at the 2008, 2009 age groups for the United States look as strong as we've ever seen. And they're going and playing really big. They're going to tournaments in Europe and beating really good teams and playing a very nice style of soccer while doing it. They're not just like out athleting these countries. They're playing good soccer and beating, clubs being countries like England, Italy, Portugal in Europe. And so I think that's I would say look less at like individuals and look more at like you're seeing our youth teams, I think, perform at a much higher level. And I think eventually we're going to see that, influence. And we're already seeing it influence the senior team. The senior team's obviously having its troubles, but you can't argue with that. There's still more young talent in the senior team pool than there's been probably ever.
Yeah, and that leads to my next question. In terms of the World Cup in the United States, what's your predictions for the U.S. national men's team? Do you think we make it out of the group and go into the round of, I think, 16, I believe? If you have a crystal ball.
It's a bigger World Cup. So I don't know if it goes straight to a round of 16 or a round of 32.
Okay.
But because it's a bigger World Cup, the groups will be weaker. I mean, making it out of the group has always been, I think, a floor for the United States over the last, 20, 30 years. So that absolutely is that's a complete failure if they don't do that in their home country. I think that we learned in this last Copa America that the United States still has a long ways to go in terms of like having the mentality to compete in a really big tournament against the best in the world. And I think part of that, I think is fair to put on the coaching, which they've obviously made. They've fired Greg Berhalter and they're going to hire a new coach. So I think it's tough to predict how far the United States could go. I think talent-wise, you'd be really excited if they could make a run to like the quarterfinals. Like I think that would be that would be, a level we've not reached many times, and I think would be that would be something I think everybody would be excited about, given the talent of the team. I think it's tough to predict. Like 2 years is a long time in soccer. Like, how are players playing in 2 years? Who kind of develops into more impactful players on the team? Who's the coach? How's that coach going to get them to play? Can he raise their level more than Greg Berhalter did? A lot of people felt that Berhalter never captured the potential of the team. Like, they always seem to play lesser than the sum of their parts, than rather than more. And so I think there's probably more pressure than realistic to put on the new coach. And then I think how these young players develop over the next couple of years, because really only a few of them are like in their prime or entering their prime still. So there's a lot to sort out in the next 2 years. But I think for me, if they could make a run to the quarterfinals, that'd be great. Semifinals would be amazing, and I think would have everybody incredibly excited and buzzing in the country. But I think that's a pretty tall task.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the World Cup final, I think, is in Dallas, I believe, or either that or New York. But that would, if we were to make it to the final, that would be quite the party.
Yes, certainly would be.
Quite the party.
Yeah, it'd be fun, but I wouldn't count on it.
At the moment. This is kind of an unfair question, but is there like a hotbed or a hotbed location in soccer? I'm just going to make it up. For example, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Are there talented players coming out of Albuquerque, New Mexico for some particular reason? Is there a region in the United States? Is there a city that's producing more? Are there academies that are producing more? What's that hotspot for youth soccer?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now I'd say the Northeast is doing the best at producing talent in the country. So,
and why is that?
I mean, I think it's always been an area that appreciated and valued the sport. So you got probably more families that do and love the sport. I think that the academies there, like Philadelphia Union, New York Red Bulls, New York City Football Club, even like New England Revolution does a pretty good job. A lot of those academies are heavily resourced. I think that's part of it. I think you still got a good amount of diversity in terms of, second, first, second generation families from, countries that love the sport. So I think there's lots of things that go into it. I think like the Midwest, like Ohio's getting better in terms of like in the Midwest in general, like the Chicagos and Ohio and Michigan areas I think are getting better. I think Florida is another area that has a lot of talent because of their South American influence.
Okay.
Los Angeles and then the Bay Area in California, so close to where I'm at. I'm in Sonoma. That's always historically been really good youth soccer in LA and in the San Francisco Bay Area. Again, a lot of Latin American influence, a lot of diversity. But there's an interesting thing happened. There isn't as much talent coming out of the West Coast that's like hitting high levels as you would expect. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I think it's still.
Is that recently?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say like the LAFC, LA Galaxy, San Jose Earthquakes, they always have good academy teams, but they haven't had a lot of players recently that are like really hitting a great level on the first team. So I don't really have a great hypothesis of what's going on there. Texas as well, like FC Dallas have kind of been the gold standard in terms of historical like academy talent in the United States. They've produced the most, U.S. men's national team players on the current team for sure. If you think about Weston McKennie, Chris Richards, even, the captain of the Olympic team that's playing right now, Tanner Tessman, is from FC Dallas. So yeah, Ricardo Pepi. There's just they've produced a lot of really high level players over the years. They've sort of plateaued, and I think people are catching up to them. But they have the most pedigree, I think, in the United States. But yeah, there's talent everywhere, and that's kind of the gift and the curse. Is it's a big country. There's a lot of talent. There's still talent maybe getting lost because there's not, like I said, there's not great coaching in academies everywhere. But the MLS academies are putting more resources into scouting nationally, and they are doing a better job of finding talent everywhere. And I think that's only going to continue.
And your absolutely favorite U.S. men's national team moment, that moment where you're just like, holy cow, like I'm obsessed with this sport, with this team. What play, what moment was it? I'll give you two.
Yeah, I mean, the two that are coming to mind, when John Brooks scored a winner in the World Cup header to now I'm blanking on if it put us through to the group stage or if it just won us.
It was off the corner kick.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and then I think Clint Dempsey's goal against Ghana to put us through. Yeah, that was like a moment. I was in a bar in San Francisco with my friends. He scored the goal, beer everywhere. The whole bar is just exploding, drenched. Yeah, and he was just like, he was the guy for me that like, I was like, man, we just wish we had more players like Clint, fearless, like always attacking, never back down to anybody, had swagger, just like played with a confidence. And you think about like Clint, he didn't play at any high level expensive academy. He went to a very humble university in Texas. I think he went to Furman. And, he went on with that very like rudimentary soccer kind of like pedigree to go on and have an incredible Premier League career. And it's like, you wonder like what could have Clint done if he had the resources that these kids have now, with his mentality, right? Like he, who knows what heights he could have taken it to. So yeah, Clint's always been a favorite of mine. And then that goal against Ghana was definitely, I'll never forget. But I would say, Christian's goal this past World Cup is probably going to be up there for me because he just sold out and, got a goal that put us through to the knockout round. And yeah, that one will be up there too. Yeah, his goal against Iran.
Do you remember this one? I'll show you.
Is it going to be Landon?
Yep.
Yeah. Definitely remember this one too.
Yeah, so this was good, right? I mean,
yeah. The call, I think I'll always remember the call. And then again, yeah, we're in extra time. Game's wide open. Yeah, I got chills just right now watching.
Yeah, I mean, I was in a nursing home when that happened, working. Yeah. And I was like, holy smokes, that just happened.
Yeah, and then we played Belgium and Tim Howard had like 20 saves.
Yeah, out of his mind. Yeah, because that got us through.
Yeah.
To I guess at that time it was 16, right?
Yeah. So I mean that's a great moment too. I think like I'm sort of a purist, right? It wasn't like the best goal. Like it was a bad clearance. He had the instincts to
follow up,
continue his run into the box, and like, you know, I guess I remember Dempsey's because maybe the quality is a little bit better. But I mean, yeah, this had the same magnitude, of course.
Yeah. All right, man. What did we leave out? We've covered a lot of bases, lots of bases, and this is just setting the table for more episodes that I tell a lot of our guests who I definitely want to come back and talk the beautiful game.
Yeah, I'd love to know what other people would like to know. Like, you know, maybe put it out to your listeners and what they'd like to talk, like to hear us talk about. I think, you know, I don't know. I think we covered a lot of stuff. Like, I'm going to keeping my eyes on what's going on in youth development and the dynamics between MLS and other leagues and these big decisions that these young people have to make. And, so yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see it evolve. Like, that's what I think that's what I love about the sport, is like, it's this one thing where we're not the best at it. And we've got a long way to go from being close to being the best. And it's kind of this underdog, like, we have to catch up mentality that I think is really fun, and to like play a role in understanding how we get there. I just think that's a really fun process. So that's why I'm like all in on it.
Yeah, same. I mean, same even with the Santa Fe Gloom. That's a small city. We're taking pride in just trying to develop as many great players as we can. We want to do our 1% of that big play.
Yeah, and that's what, and that's, I mean, you're going to be out of cash here pretty soon. Yeah, that's it, right? Like, that's what we need a lot of people to be doing. Getting people to love the game, giving people the opportunity to learn and express themselves at young ages. So appreciate what you're doing. I hope more people do that, continue to do that, and help grow the game from the bottom up, for sure.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much. I want to thank our sponsors. As always, we've got Pantry Dose. So if you ever come down to Santa Fe, I'll get you a delicious breakfast burrito.
All right.
Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Holes. We're known for our green chili.
Yes.
So it's good stuff, man. I mean, we eat it all day, every day on everything.
All right.
Then we've got Capital Ford. Thank you so much, Zach. Age Friendly Senior Care. The Pit Press Podcast. Thank you guys for making us look good with our social media. Sam's Club, Mercedes-Benz, and Botwin Eye Group Oculus. So thank you to our sponsors for making the Gloom shine even more, and for allowing everything to happen with the futsal games, the community, and having these podcasts. So we thank you guys. All right, man. Thanks. Thank you so much for jumping on. We'll have you on again.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.